Heads up, JJK fans. I know you're here to seek answers to the following questions. Did Sukuna's reverse cursed technique return? Does Miguel manage to become somewhat of a Gojo replacement since his battle performance in the previous chapter was pretty hyped, to say the least? And what exactly is this miracle called Yuji's awakening that I've been hearing in the spoilers everywhere on the internet? I hope you jumped in excitement after hearing the massive news that I've dropped, because I won't waste any more seconds of your precious time. So, what we're waiting for, let's hop onto Jujutsu Kaisen, Chapter 256. Last week, we saw Miguel and LaRue fighting Sukuna, and we also learned a lot about their curse techniques, specifically LaRue's Heart Catch and Miguel's Hakuna Lana. The battle was a huge hype, with Maki, Chozo, and Yuji returning to lend the two a hand. But just when everything is looking brighter for the team, Sukuna's antagonist's plot armor kicks off, and he slams LaRue with a second Black Flash. Then, the chapter ends with the narrator saying Gojo Satoru restored the output of his lost reverse curse technique by landing a second Black Flash. Now, in the King of the Curses case, Chapter 256 starts with a flashback as we can see Gojo being interviewed by someone who I assume is a student, since Teach Us, Gojo Sensei, is clearly depicted on the very first panel. The question being discussed is about Black Flash, given that the last few words in the previous chapter are all about this broken ability. Gojo states that Black Flash is a distortion of space that occurs when cursed energy and a physical strike land within a microsecond of each other. Now, that's a lot of zeros there. Apparently, no matter how strong Gojo is, and despite possessing the 6 eyes, using Black Flash 100% of the time is plainly impossible, even if he wanted to do so. Gojo emphasizes 3 possible results when he focuses cursed energy on his fists and throws a punch. First, the cursed energy stored will strengthen his fist. Second, it might crash into the opponent. And third, all of the above. This sounds simple at first, but these things, which are obviously related to Black Flash, are actually pretty complex even for Gojo. That's because even for him, activating Black Flash still relies on luck and definitely not on cursed technique mastery or physical prowess, as I mentioned earlier. Remember that Gojo wasn't even seen hitting Black Flash on his opponents that much in the anime. Actually, I can't even recall a single time he did that, but that's pretty much thanks to my sleeping memory. There is also a reason behind Gojo's lack of Black Flash hype moments, and we'll get to that part soon. Nonetheless, we dive deeper into the conditions affecting Black Flash's usage right from the start of the chapter. Factors like the timing of the impact, its blend with stored cursed energy, the environment, the condition of the sorcerer's body, and even the level of the enemy's curse energy itself are crucial prerequisites for the ability's activation. It's pretty absurd since temperature and humidity also matter. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be the next Shōo Todoroki and manipulate the hotness and coldness around you to summon a Black Flash. That's terrible taste right there. Anyway, Gojo admits afterward that Nanami is levels above him in terms of hitting consecutive Black Flashes, but in the first place, that's because Gojo's battles usually don't require him to fight longer, considering that he's still the record holder in the total number of Black Flash usage. Put simply, how can Gojo beat the record of most in a row when the enemy quickly grovels in defeat before he can even start? Of course, that was the common development until Gojo faced off with Sukuna, and then we get to the part where he needs to go above and beyond in an attempt to put a permanent end to the King of Curses. However, since this scene happened in the past, Geji mentioned that Yuji has already surpassed him in that aspect. Now that I have mentioned it, speaking of Sukuna, he says he's smiling madly despite not having enough power to heal his heart and fully regenerate the removed parts. It turns out that even with the second Black Flash earlier, he's still unable to restore a vast percentage of his lost reverse cursed technique. However, Yuji and the others can't possibly determine it with a single glance. The question in Yuji's mind is basically the same as us this past week, as he is wondering if Sukuna will become much more of an impossible to beat boss level threat, considering the possibility of the revival of his reverse curse technique. There's one more thought lying in his speech bubble though. Who are those two? This is not a surprise since Yuji hasn't really met Miguel and LaRue in the past. Those two only appeared on JJK0, but LaRue, on the other hand, also made a short appearance on the Shibuya incident arc. That said, he was in a meeting with his fellow Geto supporters at that time, discussing what course of action to take regarding Kenjaku. A confrontation occurs since Nanako and Mimiko don't want to help the villain who stole Geto's body, while some are unsurprisingly okay with it. Anyway, that's another story. I'll get back to the topic regarding Nanako and Mimiko later, but the current point is that Yuji didn't meet LaRue, let alone Miguel, in spite of those old scenes. Surely they didn't also attend the crew's meetings within the 1-month time skip before the Grand Shinjuku showdown. Despite that, Maki instantly recognizes that Miguel and LaRue might be the ones Yuta mentioned as their backup combatants. Now this is rather smart and wholesome, but Choso concludes that the two must be on their side since Maki and Yuji have been silent this whole time. Little did they know that Miguel was lamenting how bad the situation turned out and was thinking of getting out of Dodge as soon as they could. After all, they can't just disregard Sukuna regaining some sort of boost or power-up and making their lives harder than they already are. So without further ado, Yuji and Choso wasted no time and headed straight for Sukuna. Choso employs blood manipulation, while Yuji wields a particular object as a weapon. Specifically, Yuji utilizes a railing near him and sandwiches Sukuna between the fence and the wall. This creates an opening for Choso to shoot piercing blood onto the King of Curses. Man, we gotta applaud the coordination of these two brothers here, since they did that without discussing a plan beforehand. However, their efforts weren't enough. Sukuna easily escapes from Yuji's grasp, thus avoiding Choso's attack without difficulties whatsoever. However, the next page hides someone's shadow rushing at Sukuna while concealing its presence. Without Sukuna even noticing it in time, Maki charges and catches him off guard, or so we wish. Unlike last time when Maki managed to inflict significant damage on the King of Curses by hiding in Yuta's domain and commencing a surprise attack, Sukuna grabbed the blade before it went through his chest. That doesn't stop Maki though. She uses the air as footholds while executing a barrage of attacks. Still, can these maneuvers ultimately impair Sukuna? To be fair, treating invisible thin air as footings is already a remarkable feat, seeing that even Choso is struck by amazement just watching those absurd movements unfolding right in front of his eyes. But what about Sukuna? Well, he looks so excited at the developments and is currently in the zone for another banger strike. If you remember the narrator's note in chapter 253, it said that the likes of Kashimo, Higuruma, and even Yuta are just appetizers for the King of Curses. After all, ever since Gojo's defeat, the one who actually managed to bring ecstasy to Sukuna was, ironically, someone who had abandoned Jujutsu sorcery by means of heavenly restriction. In other words, it's Maki who gives Sukuna pleasure in battle, unlike the ones I have just mentioned. That explains why Sukuna has this mad smile, as you can see in this panel. In fact, this excitement might have just become the trigger for what's coming up next. Immediately, Sukuna hits Maki with his third Black Flash. Maki receives it head-on without having the chance to block or repel the critical blow. Sukuna also follows it up with numerous dismantles, causing Maki to notice that the output of Sukuna's slashes has increased too. This is definitely due to the effects of Black Flash. Even though we can see that Sukuna is not recovering yet, it's possible that his cursed energy is gradually being restored. This is absolutely bad news, like what Miguel said earlier, and he's not even present in this ongoing skirmish. Recently, it's been Yuji, Choso, and Maki's turn, but we'll get an update regarding their state later on, given that LaRue received Sukuna's second Black Flash and is gravely wounded. Returning to the action, Sukuna sends another set of slashes toward Maki, but Choso makes it in time to block all those using Supernova. See these tiny dots on this page? Those guys burst out to prevent Maki from getting more injured, since it takes a bit more time for her to regenerate through self-healing. Despite that, Sukuna's attacks enter the scene again. This time, he refuses to give Choso any hope of intercepting them by swiftly going behind his blind spot. And because Choso notices it too late, he realizes that this is the moment where he, the word. As if proving that, Sukuna slams Choso into the wall. Besides clicking his tongue, Choso does nothing but wholeheartedly accept Sukuna's fourth Black Flash. On the bright side, the King of Curses' reverse cursed technique fails to return in the second and third Black Flash, possibly even in the latest strike. Obviously, his case is different from Gojo's, since the state of their body and cursed energy also differ. To top it off, Yuji's punches and Maki's attacks from her soul-splitting katana have significantly weakened Sukuna. Nevertheless, the situation remains grave because the fact that Choso and Maki were hit by a fatal blow tremendously affects their chances of winning. Fortunately, Choso creates armor to reduce the damage of the Black Flash, so he's okay for now. Moreover, the next thing Sukuna senses is a right hook straight into his face as Yuji returns to start the counterattack. Thinking that Sukuna's power boosts will stay weakened as long as Yuji hits him, Choso hands something to his brother, signaling him to use a certain ability that will confirm any fans' speculations. We'll reach that point again later, as the next page of the chapter shows Miguel urging LaRue to retreat, saying they have done enough to help in this showdown. However, LaRue rejects his proposal because he apparently isn't over yet. Miguel's action is not a surprise since he values his comrade's safety most of all, and those two can't really fight together now because of LaRue's injuries. Previously, Miguel mentioned that the last condition for his participation in the battle is that LaRue should accompany him. That can't be fulfilled now, obviously, so let's look forward to LaRue's unfinished business here. On the next page, Yuji engages Sukuna in close quarter, hand-to-hand combat. Still, Sukuna retains the upper hand as he tries to slam Yuji into the ground. However, it seems like it is all according to plan since Yuji reacts to Sukuna's grapple with a very familiar stance. Yes, the piercing blood. Even Sukuna is shocked at this sudden development, but chapter 251 actually hints that Yuji can use blood manipulation, specifically when he spits blood on Sukuna's face and bursts it afterward. But as it turns out, Yuji hasn't mastered convergence yet, which means that the thing Choso gave him earlier must be the trigger for him to successfully activate the ability. Unfortunately, Sukuna manages to push Yuji away before the skill releases, or at least that's what it looks like based on these panels. However, Yuji gets into the zone after that and is prepared to hit a massive strike. Sukuna receives a premonition of a Black Flash, similar to what Mahito sensed from Yuji back in the Shibuya incident arc. Yet, he doesn't respond accordingly to the upcoming attack because something, or rather someone, forcibly catches Sukuna's attention. In fact, his eyes turned heart-shaped as if charmed, and that is due to LaRue's heart catch, which not only grabs the target's physical body but also seizes their heart. Think of it as a forced charm. LaRue calls the ability Cutie Honey. Honestly, what a cutesy name to label a super dangerous technique. Now we know why he refuses to retreat with Miguel, and I suspect LaRue's motives for this must be related to Nanako and Mimiko. After all, Sukuna was the one who hastened the end of those girls' lifespan, so maybe LaRue is seeking revenge since he values his family. Otherwise, I can't think of any reason why he went this far. That aside, let's proceed to the next page because Yuji just smashes Sukuna with a Black Flash. Thanks to the opening created by Cutie Honey, Sukuna fails to block, let alone evade Yuji's attack, even though he has seen it coming from miles away. Don't forget that Yuji's punches directly target the barrier between Sukuna and Megumi's soul. So just imagine what a single Black Flash can do to the King of Curses. The last page shows Yuji in his fighting stance, and the chapter ends with the narrator saying, unleashing his potential with a single blow, beneath the scattering sparks of black, Itadori Yuji awakens. At last, Yuji finally gets the moment he deserves since we are all witnesses to how much he has suffered in these past few hundred chapters. From the victims of Sukuna's rampage when he forcibly switches with Yuji, Sukuna possessing Megumi, the demises of Junpei, Nobara, and Nanami, you name it. With this awakening, Yuji's endurance and efforts are finally paying off. and I'm sure this is one of the most hype events the JJK fandom is impatiently waiting for. I initially expected this chapter to be a change in point of view or a comeback of another character, but man, how satisfied I am to see this chilling development. Now, this might come off as an unpopular opinion. However, aside from Yuji's awakening, I personally think that this progress is all about Black Flash, since there were 3 of them in this chapter alone. There's also the flashback in the first few pages. That said, this final scene particularly leaves us with one intriguing question. Will Yuji land another Black Flash on Sukuna in the next chapter? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Press the like button if you enjoyed the video, and if you don't want to miss out on future JJK chapters like this one, definitely subscribe and hit that bell icon. Thank you for watching the video. Jujutsu Kaisen will take a break next week, so I'll see you in the next video.